Ladies and gentlemen, this is Africa, the continent, and we know that the divisions have been a result of long colonial pursuits and also post-colonial arrangements that pretty much came after the Second World War. But how many of you can tell me where is Uganda in the map?
Where?
Chris? Yeah.
It's east.
Is it the east? Yeah, but which one exactly?
I want to say it's southwest of Somalia.
Southwest of Somalia. We'll see about that. Moving on, please to the next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, in order for us to understand how Africa looks like now, I'll have provided you a map of each of the individual countries that make up the African continent today. Whenever we think about Africa, we tend to think about starving kids, a lot of problems that plague the countries, and perhaps hunger, probably just a very orientalist picture about Africa. Moving on. Here we see some of the posters that have been made public to the international media and also social media, be it Facebook, Instagram, which I'm really on, by the way, and Twitter. Here we have the first poster of Kony, and the slogan up there says, "Stop at nothing." I just found it interesting that whenever there's a campaign for something that calls upon each and every one of us to act upon something, it triggers something negative, an idea that each and every one could gather around. For example, we have a picture of Kony that is placed strategically, I would say, above Osama bin Laden. Whenever we think about these sort of associations, much of what conjures in our mind is pretty much Joseph Kony's a terrorist. It doesn't take too long for us to decipher the meaning or the message that the poster is trying to say. And below, we have a poster promoting the movie. And interestingly, it's a very nice mixture of the activists, pretty much come from America, as well as those who actually come from Uganda, who actually came to America to send some awareness about the campaign and hopefully get people on the bandwagon. What is so striking about this issue? That brings us to the next slide. Here we have Jason Russell's son, whose name is Gavin Russell. He was one of the actors, I would say, who actually was featured in the movie. And in the movie, it's very interesting to see that his father, Jason Russell, was actually asking the child a few questions about this issue. When I was watching this, I remember telling myself, why is it that as a 22-year-old, I don't even know about this issue, if it was really a grave issue that pretty much concerns everybody? And it invokes a sense of shame, a sense of humiliation, a sense of ignorance on our part, that to a point, we question ourselves, why is it that a child of such a very tender young age be able to understand the gravity of such issue, but not us who are enlightened, informed, and maybe knowledgeable in a lot of international affairs? And then what I also liked about this movie was that it plays a lot with the rhetoric of children. When we think about children, we tend to think they are innocuous. They are fragile. They are very much malleable to a lot of ideas that pretty much surrounds them in the social environment. And whenever we think that at this stage where children are internalizing values that will pretty much define their views on life and the perspectives about issues, it saddens us. It's very disheartening to know that there are not many children like Gavin Russell. Why? Because now we see here below, we have images of child soldiers. For so many of us who understand the gravity of the issue, this is something despicable. How is it that children at such a young age be moved into such violence, such harmful environment that may affect them so much whenever they enter into the real world? And how is it that we socialize them into a world that we know that they never got exposed to? But here's the thing. One of the ways that we tend to draw attention to this issue is that we focus this issue because of its appeal to human rights. We tend to think of children and how fragile life is at that age for so many of us. And it doesn't take too long for us to be struck at the heartstrings, to actually be able to understand the gravity of the issue, and at the same time take action into the issue. Moving on to the next slide. One of the things that I questioned after watching the video itself is that I started reading the articles about Invisible Children, which is the nonprofit dedicated to the cause, and asked myself, where is Joseph Kony at the moment? We do know that the United States has sent 100 U.S. Special Forces personnel, especially ordered by President Barack Obama, into Uganda in 2011, sometime late in the year. And this was to help the forces in Uganda, as well as Congo and other surrounding regions of Uganda, to be able to track down Kony. But the result has not been substantiated. One of the researchers for foreignpolicy.com, named Aaron Miller, who's also a political scientist and a very known academic figure in international affairs, said that Joseph Kony hasn't been in fact in Uganda for a few years. Let me tell you, this is very, very serious. 6 years he hasn't been in Uganda. And when people say that he has been developing new strategies and new tactics to make sure that his resistance army has always been enforced, there's pretty much no substantial evidence to say that he has been around and still being active. And there's also some manipulation of statistics that Invisible Children has done. While they said that over 30,000 children have been drafted into the child soldiers army, in fact, this is an accumulation of the children that have been drafted over the past 30 years. I hope you are able to see what sort of situation that we're seeing here. We tend to make the situation so current by taking history into the present in order to make sure that we're either thinking or probably to action upon something. I also kind of want to draw attention to the poster that's on our right. There is the image of an elephant and the image of the donkey. For so many of us who understand American politics, this is supposed to be a partisan issue. In fact, human rights is an issue that everybody should be able to be aware of. And such posters seem to suggest that this is an issue both Republicans and Democrats are able to bridge their differences and settle down on a common solution. But what is also critical about this poster is that whenever we think about this sort of bipartisan solution, I was pretty much curious as to why they suggested the necessity of deploying U.S. soldiers into this cause, when in fact, when we understand history about U.S. foreign policy especially, we tend to think that the United States has always been involved in countries in which they have an economic or strategic interest in this country. And if you understand the issue in which the United States was trying to help on a humanitarian basis, especially in Somalia in 1990, we didn't succeed. In fact, if anyone has ever read about the history of Somalia, the civil war that has been ongoing has turned against the U.S. to a point that the Black Hawk Down, which is exactly the movie that you saw in the movies, is based on that story. How is it that this time that we're using the same strategy in Uganda on the basis of fighting for human rights, fighting for the rights of these children? How are we supposed to know that it's going to succeed when there are factors on the ground that suggest otherwise? There's also the neglect that we tend to overlook. That whenever it's such an issue that's pretty much localized becomes an international issue, we forget the voices of the people that are speaking about this issue. As we read here, Isaac Amato, whose brother is still in part of the Lord's Resistance Army, which is Joseph Kony's army, he stated that they just want to forget all about Kony. This seems to suggest that there are some parts of history that people just want to forget. And in this sense, it seems to put forward to us that there are other pressing issues. There are other issues that need to be addressed upon, and this is just one, while it may be serious to us, may not be a national interest in them. Why is it that Uganda draws so much of our attention just because of a 30-minute video that informs us of such situations? Why is it Uganda is placed as front and center in our media today and placed as one of the priorities in our national security? Well, in fact, there are other pressing issues. Take, for example, the ongoing massacre by Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and it's been ongoing for 1 year. And yet we still have yet to take a pressing action on that country. And then we have Palestine, which is still ongoing for about almost 100 years, and yet the United States still doesn't withdraw from it. My point is, you can see that the United States never really had a specific approach when it comes to its own national security, and even if that means intervention abroad or some sort of diplomacy, it only plays so well if the United States has its interest. That's very vital to its own prosperity in the global scale. Moving on. It's so interesting to see, and I have to say it's very ironic, that the United States tends to drag itself into problems in other countries when in fact we have a myriad of problems that still goes on in our country. Take, for example, the issue of homelessness. Why is it that people who are living abroad tend to get more attention when in fact the people who are homeless on the streets in Ann Arbor, it takes so much time to actually get a piece of our sympathy just for a few cents, maybe $1. And why is it that we spend about $30 just to get an action kit from the Invisible Children movement? And what about this contraception debate that people have said to have infringed on women's rights, as women's right to choose? And what is it about our unemployment scales and rates that are still prevalent now, and the issues in the aftermath of the financial crisis in 2008? Have we still gotten a solution to that? Do we still see a rise in all the promises that Obama made for green energy? Is there a substantial result from those things? Yeah. And what about our ongoing intervention in Afghanistan? Yes, anyone can argue that we have withdrawn from Iraq, but we still have yet to solve this idea. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not suggesting you to start calling your congresspeople and tell them for a solution, nor do I want you to start picketing on the streets, although I would think I would really appreciate it and get people aware of some of these things that the media has failed to highlight to all of us. But my point is, we have to rethink and reconsider the issues that we are passionate about and try to see it from a very historical perspective in order to understand the situation today. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.